We are going to talk about dashboards today, and this has been a long challenge for Heritage. Heritage has been in the system probably about 18 to 20 years now. Mary's been there for just about the whole time. I was there a little bit longer. And we have, at Heritage, exhausted most of the possibilities with Crystal. Mary, I remember in the early days I would make a Crystal report for Mary, and it was just down and dirty data. Say, Mary, here it is. And then when she got done playing with it, it was down and dirty data that was very pretty and looked a lot different than what we gave it to her. So she's done a lot with reports in Crystal, and this whole discussion of dashboards came up when we know Echo's been presenting dashboards, and we looked at those and wanted to do something with those. Let's keep going there. Dashboard, I think we're past the definition. It's interesting looking back over the my last 25 years in the business as a clinician first, and then moving into the IT world, to see how behavioral health is trying to keep pace in a lot of cases with some of the bigger agencies. I've noticed in the IT world and the electronic world that the medical world seems to be quite a bit ahead. They've got more money, they've got more resources. So they were talking about dashboards 10 years ago. We were thinking about dashboards 10 years ago, but they were starting to definitely use dashboards. And I know that now we're probably still a little bit behind, but I think we're at the point where most agencies that I've talked with and that I'm working with or have contact with have some type of interest in trying to have some way of looking at the data that's been collected in the system and make some sense out of it and be able to do something with it. So I think we are at the place now in behavioral health where dashboards have a good place, and it's just a matter of getting to that point. So hopefully today you'll be able to see some things with dashboards. I definitely want to have some input from you on what's going to make a good dashboard, but looking forward to it. So dashboard definition, go ahead, Mayor. We all think we have a good organization. We all think we're serving our clients. We all think we're doing what needs to be done to meet the needs in our community. But how do we know? Can we prove it? Can we show somebody? I know in most states now we're definitely getting to the point where there is pay for performance. We need to be performing. We need to be able to show that we are doing what the funder is paying us to do. So dashboards may look completely different in each one of our states. Mayor, I got a clicker here.
I know.
This is distracting. So can we prove it? Where is your data in the system? Some here today may be real early in starting with Echo. Some may have been doing it for years. But somewhere along the way, we have to get to the point, and we're all well aware of it, that when we're collecting data on our screens, and we're designing screens and putting data, we've got 50, 75, 100 staff putting data into these screens that we've designed. It's going into a table somewhere, and we're collecting it in fields. And we're writing Crystal reports to be able to see some of that data, but I think we've moved past the point now. We know that we've got to collect our data in places where we can see it, in places where we can sum it up, in places where we can evaluate it and be able to do something with it. How are we collecting it? How much data do you have? How big is your database? All data fields, holding data, what are we going to do with it? What's going to be important for you? And is that data good data? Is it data that you've been collecting? I know numerous times I've gone into the database, and unless we validate the field, I remember real early on when we were collecting data at Heritage and designing, screen after screen. We live, in Decatur. Heritage is in a city called Decatur. But when you go into the database and you look at that field where that's collected, city_VC, and you see Decatur spelled 23 different ways in your system, and then be able to have to interpret that and what did they really mean. If you're going to start doing any type of evaluation, you've got to get the data. You've got to get the data clean. It's got to be good data to be able to evaluate. Or else, this is what we run into. I didn't get the punctuation right on the top of this slide, but it's no, really, with good data. How do we define good data? How would you define good data in your agency? Well, let me ask it another way. As you've looked at your system, have you seen any bad data? What does bad data look like? I think they said this morning, this place where we learn from each other and we share. What does bad data look like in your agency?
Could be things that are not even completed.
Okay, fields completely blank, not even completed.
Not validated fields, and then you've got data everywhere, and misspelling of stuff.
Okay. You know what Heritage did with their mental health assessment that shouldn't have had empty fields in it? Literally wrote a crystal report that looked at every single field in the, what does it print off as? 15 pages now? I think it prints off as 15 pages. Literally, before they turn it in, there's a crystal report that they run, and it flags every field that's empty that shouldn't be empty to try and clean up, that type of data. So bad validations, completely empty. What else does bad data look like?
Conflicting things that don't make any sense. Like one question might be answered one way, and then the next question might have an answer that doesn't make sense with the first answer.
Okay, or it's contradictory information. When was the last time, if you collect BMIs? I've seen BMIs as high as 4,672. How about you? You know what that does to your data as a whole if you've got even one outlier like that? Oh my gosh. So now every month just run a query to just check in for any bad BMIs out there, and then somebody's got to go in and fix that. But bad data could look differently at our agencies, but so will the good data. What's the data that you want to be collecting? And have you got your system set up to collect it in a way that you know this is going to be good data? And if you're not sure of that, you've got to be checking it to make sure it is good. Because the minute that we start doing dashboards or starting to make decisions based upon the data that's in our system, you better have good data, or somebody's going to be making bad decisions. Okay. Mary, I don't have a clicker anymore.
Oh, I have control.
Do the next one. You got it. See?
Oh, neither do I. There we go.
All right. So the good data is important, being able to see the good data, being able to make decisions. Funders are demanding it, competition demands it, and our clients deserve it. Don't we all want to be the provider of choice when it comes to the services we provide? And how are we going to communicate to our clients, communicate to our funders that we can be the provider of choice for them? Hopefully the clients realize it because of the quality of care that we're giving. And the funders would realize it, hopefully, by if they're asking for data, that we're able to give them data and outcome measures. But somewhere along the way, we've got to have a way of tracking what that data looks like to stay on top of it. We've been doing it for a long time with Crystal. The dashboards is another option to be able to do that. You're probably familiar with this screen. So many. I remember when Echo first started talking about the dashboards, there was just going to be a few of them, but it's gotten much more comprehensive now, and the dashboards are here. And dashboards, I've sat through numerous presentations on dashboards from other dashboard companies that are willing to sit down with you and look at your data dashboard-wise. And there's no limit to the things. You've got the data now. How do you want to present it? How do you want to look at it? Numerous ways to do it. When we were thinking about this presentation, I didn't think that dashboards like this would be helpful for somebody that was sitting at the decision making, at the chief information officer, the CEO, the CFO. It's good presentation, and there's a lot of things to select from, a lot of things to drill down on, but is it really asking the question for a CEO? How can I answer the question, or how can I have data presented in a way that I can look at it every morning and within 5 minutes know, is my agency healthy? Are we doing the things that we need to do from my perspective to be able to say, hey, I can sleep tonight, I know we're doing what we need to do, or, oop, not sleeping tonight, I need to talk to whoever I need to talk to. That dashboard's got to give them that picture as briefly as possible, and maybe with a little bit of drill down to know, who do I have to talk to? What supervisor do I need to work with? So, how healthy is my agency? How successful? What would it look like? I'd really like to open this up a little bit, because we just developed a couple of dashboards to try to get at answering these questions. But if you start thinking about some of the things I've already talked about, your data, what your executives need to make decisions you've been making, where are your struggles with your data? What do you need to see to know we're right where we need to be? What does that look like in your agency? What would a good dashboard look like? What would you want to see? Because we were just guessing. What would you want to see?
How many unworked denials out there?
Do what?
How many unworked denials?
Okay.
Claims?
Okay. That's on the billing. That's definitely a billing side. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have swore that's what I saw in the next gen software, was somewhere on one of those drop downs where it was 2 errors or 8 errors. I'm assuming one of those would be unworked denials that you could go right to them.
Depending on what level, probably overall productivity percentage
Okay.
with some past data.
All right. So this is clinical productivity. Okay. Is that like in hours worked, or
Well,
billable hours provided? Okay.
by program.
By program. Okay.
Yeah, but it could also be how many things are not finished. Yeah.
Okay.
How much documentation is coming up that hasn't even gone to billing yet?
Right, exactly.
Okay. I think some of the dashboards that Echo has, where they're looking at things that are not signed or date differentials, what staff is taking the longest to sign documents. I think some of those dashboards are present. They have a lot of information on them, so you might have to narrow the scope a little bit, but I think some of those, if you look at that list, might get at that.
So can I clarify your
What?
question? I want to clarify, because I think
Sure.
some of us are getting, our thinking is, at least mine, is getting drilled down.
Okay, good.
So are you asking from the framework of This is what the CEO.
I'd like to
should
think
look
of,
at.
I'd like to think about it I'd like to think about it at the CEO level, because one of the things that I feel like most of our CEOs and our executives know that there's an electronic record. I mean, somewhere they signed off, to pay for it, and they know that the name is Echo, and they know that we're using, that record. But there's a disconnect in a lot of cases. There's a couple CEOs here, but not a lot. There's a disconnect, I think, sometimes between the CEOs and what we're actually doing in the field. They know it's generating income, they know there's productivity, and I think even the dashboards that Echo has are just a little bit too busy for a CEO. They wanted something that's just a lot simpler and make that connection between, hey, when I see this dashboard, that's that electronic record that we spent. What are we doing with that record? And be able to see that real quickly and drill down if they want to start dealing with it. So yeah, I'm thinking more on a global. So if you've got, what would that look like for you guys?
Years ago, Echo had something called 12 numbers. It never materialized, but it really sold me on Echo. And it really gave me that one shot of how my agency was doing, the global picture.
Yep, okay. So it's maybe getting back at, and I think that's to me, that's indicative of behavioral health in general. I mean, I don't know how long ago the 12 numbers were, 10, 15 years ago, but it was kind of like, it was way ahead of its time. That's one of the things I've appreciated about the relationship that we have with Echo is they're trying to stay out in front. And they're doing creative things. And that 12 numbers was way ahead of the ball game back then. So
Steve, we are looking at things like, doing comparative unit counts from last year's performance to this year's performance and bringing in understanding the environmental causes that are causing that and trying to figure out, okay, we've got this environmental issue going on in North Carolina, how do we improve it and how do we get that in place? And often that's a drill down in the services that we're delivering and how we're delivering those services and where we're delivering those services.
Yep.
And then we're also, once you drill down into those service deliveries, what is the level of practitioner doing it? Which practitioners are being successful versus which ones are not being successful? And so that's kind of what we're doing is kind of taking it from big level money all the way down so that a CEO wants to get, because our CEO a lot of times wants to get it down into the detail, especially when there's something going on in North Carolina. He wants to use the dashboard to resolve it and figure out how we can get in front of
right,
it.
and know where to focus his efforts real quickly to be able to drill down.
Correct.
Yep.
One of the population that you're serving and also the diagnoses that goes along with it to better prepare clinicians to provide that support.
To that diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think Echo's got a number of dashboards along those lines as well.
Outcomes is
Yeah.
important too. Looking at the outcomes, are the services that you're delivering actually effective? And so we track a bunch of that data inside clinicians' desktop and other databases that we have, and then we pull it all together to figure out, are we truly being effective?
Are you pulling it together? Are you using dashboards, or are you using a lot of Crystal?
We are, right now, we are embarking on a project to use dashboards and pulling a lot of data
Okay.
into dashboards.
Yep.
We've still got, as you know, building one dashboard isn't enough, and so we're pretty much into building like 1,000, I swear. It's almost like you can't standardize it once you get into it. It just becomes this.
One thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. Yeah, there's got to be. I guess I'm more of a mind that simpler is better, and if you need to drill down, you should be able to do that from your dashboard. But you got to decide what your key things are. Yeah. Anybody else?
Churn rate, you need to know if your programs are growing or are they shrinking depending on emissions and discharges. So you know where to spend your marketing dollars.
What would that dashboard look like, Dan?
I have no idea. I don't have a dashboard right now.
Okay, but what would you like?
I want to know.
What would you like that to look? What would that look like? Would that be, a pie thing, a bar, some lime? I mean, what would that look like to you? Just
Trending over time, so I want to see is my ACT program, which has a margin to it, growing or shrinking, versus my
Okay.
outpatient program, which kills me. Is it growing or shrinking? And
okay. How do you know it kills you?
My financials tell me.
Okay,
Every month.
okay, okay, okay. So you could see it on the financial side, but then you could relate those financials to specific numbers too, admissions and discharge.
Take it a step further with your admission and discharges and kind of relate to other data you have in your database. If you're capturing reasons for referrals in which clients you're not serving, is there a gap there that might help bring up some of those reasons why your admissions aren't as high as they were? So you could take all of this and kind of just push a button and say, okay, my admissions are down, but my gap for serving this population is huge. Let's go ahead and start bringing in best practices and serving that
Yeah.
population.
That's how you get 1,000 dashboards.
Well,
Just-
so some of that
just-
on the dashboard is on the reporting side.
Yep.
So, one of the things that we're working on is to be able to use like the PHQ-9 to identify who my top, people who are scoring above 20 on the PHQ-9, who have a diagnosis of a certain major depression, who
Right.
haven't been referred to ACT, who also have more than 3 hospitalizations. So again,
Yep.
I can start
Okay.
looking at the 33,000 people my organization serves and figure out who have I not gotten to my
Okay.
prolific service line. But that's not dashboarding necessarily, it is reporting.
I'll show you something a little bit later on this presentation that hits that as well. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I got it back. So again, kind of getting at the data, but how do we get to the real knowledge, the real point where we can make decisions? And being able to make good decisions from your data. Can you all see that? Okay. Or this is a common response. Once you start looking at the data and start presenting the data and start challenging people with your data, how much confidence do they have in your data? Or is there the usual defensiveness? What do you mean? Well, you don't know what our staffing issue is like right now. You don't know, we just lost our supervisor, whatever the environmental issue may be. There's always some. Good data should help us make good decisions, but there's always a reason for bad data. There's always some explanation. When you start talking about data, there's going to be a reason. And it just brings up defensiveness. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. And the accuracy of the data. Are you pulling all your data? Or are you just pulling? I think that's probably the biggest challenge. You've heard the anecdote that, well, I can get the data to say, whatever I want it to say. There's a lot of cartoons related to that, but I wanted to somehow get at the idea that I think we're collecting the data now. I think we've been in it long enough that we've got the data there, but it's how can we present it in a way that's going to be easy for somebody to grasp and easy for somebody to then take and supervise the staff that they have to supervise. Talk to the people they need to talk to get it done. There's probably going to be defensiveness, but if you do it long enough, I know the challenge at Heritage that Mary will be talking about, it took years before people started believing the data that was getting shared. Because they would see that Decatur was spelled 23 different ways in the system, and so how can the stuff you're saying about the data actually be good data when it's not even validated correctly, or there's fields missing you didn't take into consideration, or there's a 4,600 BMI or something like that. Wait a minute, what about that 4,600 BMI? Is that figured into the numbers? So for better or worse, the challenge to work with dashboards, here's a clinical, quasi-financial dashboard that was meant to try and be simple, present something real quick, and then be able to also drill down and see where we needed to work. At Heritage, they have to do assessments on a regular basis, of course treatment plans on a regular basis, and there was a concern about what the Medicaid mix was and if that was getting better or not. And so these dashboards got to that point. When we talked about this a number of months ago and trying to develop this and working with Echo to do that, Matt was very helpful in assigning the staff to kind of look at this. Alan kind of oversaw what we were doing, and I appreciated Elijah, who's here sitting next to Alan, and Gavin, who was another young gentleman intern that also helped with starting these. But it's been an interesting process to kind of nail down how to look at the data and present it in a way. They had the dashboards, they started working with some queries, we had some queries, and on some of them it was just a matter of taking the crystal reports that everyone was looking at and somehow converting that data into a dashboard. So on this one here you can see the assessments, Medicaid mixed treatment plans. Basically there's 21 leaders that make up this, 92 staff that make this up. Same on the treatment plan side, there must be an extra staff member on the treatment plan side. But very quickly to see who's active, who's not active, what needs to be done. And set your own parameters here. What's something that needs to be, what's something that needs to be reviewed? Is that 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, a month out? You're setting your own parameters. But real quickly, someone can look at this, a CEO level person or one of these leaders can look at it real quickly, and they can drill down basically by leader code. They can filter out and select their leader, who they are. They can see their staff. They can see how many they have inactive or not complete. And literally at the beginning of the day to look at that and know, okay, this leader comes in, these are all of their staff, and there are things not completed. I'd start right there. What's going on? There's no question about where to start. And at staff meeting, to talk about and bring this up. But literally this dashboard can be on everyone's desk. Leader, and staff can have access to it as well. It's just a quick web link. And those drill downs, same thing for treatment plan assessment. Basically, not too deep. It's not drilling down too deep because I don't want my CEO getting lost in the weeds, so to speak. It's like, hey, let me show you the forest, and you just need to worry about what supervisor to talk to about their area and say, I'm going to be looking for these improvements like tomorrow when I see the dashboard when I come in. Here's a financial health one. Basically getting at collected, expected by pay source. This one, Dan, literally will go down and you can look at it by program if you wanted to drill down and see, and by the specific. Here's the 4 pay sources that they wanted to divide out at Heritage, and set it for whatever date range you want to set it at. Set the filters, select the program, select possibly the pay source, and then see what the differences are. This just shows it a different way, just shows it on a line graph over time. And again, seeing the same thing. You're on the breakdown here of Medicaid, and you can see it here. And then you can break it down even farther if you want to do it by pay source code or by program. But again, it's meant to just a quick look and then say, what do I want to do? What do I want to do from there? For better, this was, I think, taken a month ago. This is one that we were kind of tracking, and we started with RCM. Heritage started with RCM July 1st, and this number as of the other day, this was screenshot. This number as of the other day was 102. So they're working the AR and getting that number down, but now we can see it every day. So if it's still 102 next week, we're talking to somebody. What are they doing? Ashley's got it covered. Any questions about what you're seeing? Thoughts? Okay. Productivity. Mary's got a story to tell. Go ahead, Mary.
So we've done a lot of presentations through the years on productivity at peer-to-peer, and we thought we had it mastered, and we were really proud of what we were doing with productivity in regards to giving reports and collecting the information. However, it wasn't resulting in increased productivity necessarily. We just had pretty reports. So I felt like I was doing a good job anyway. So anyway, we had created, a couple years ago, we created a table that collected the staff's annual target, and we put that number then into a crystal report, just dumped it into a crystal report, and we calculated, divided it out by 52 weeks and what their weekly target would be, and then we would take the total from active work of their staff duration, subtract that from their weekly expected, and create a weekly report that showed did they meet or not meet, which was better than what we ever had. And staff, that's when the excuses started, because now they were seeing it a lot differently.
Those are reasons. Those are reasons.
Pardon me.
Good, valid.
Yeah, good and valid reasons.
So they trusted the data now, and we didn't have that issue anymore. We did do that. For years, I had people in my office, I don't think this is right. It can't be right. And I'd have to go through it and, oh, well, yeah, it is right. So they got to the point they trusted it, but now the reason, well, they had a flat tire on Monday, so they didn't work half a day. Or, it's just always something. They were sick Monday and Tuesday. It was just all these reasons, and they were different for every person. So then they were wanting, can you adjust the report, because I want them to know where they're at for that week. So, they wanted every week to be accurate. So they wanted to really know what was going on with every staff for every week. So trying to manage that through formulas in Crystal is a nightmare with about 90 staff that you're trying to do productivity on. And so every week you're adding something new. You're putting a new, MKM2 needs, so it was became an administrative nightmare. While the table was nice, it was great, we knew what everybody's annual target was, but we were spending an awfully lot of time on an administrative side trying to make sure they saw it the way they wanted to see it, so they felt good about what they were seeing. So it's kind of hard to see this report, but this was the report prior to, this was for 52 weeks, and it just showed if they would, right here, you can't really see it on here, but this column would be in green if they met for the week, and if they didn't meet, it would be in red. So they could see, and you could kind of see trends if people were increasing over time and whatnot. So it was an improvement. They were happy with it. They definitely were on me if they didn't get it when they expected it. They wanted to know where their productivity reports were. So staff definitely appreciated it. But after Steve and I were talking about, and I was just getting really frustrated with the amount of time I was putting in behind the scenes to try to get the reports ready for them. We got to find some way to do this and make it easier. So this year, starting July 1st, July is our fiscal year in Illinois, we created a new table to create to collect productivity and calculate it for staff. So every staff person gets 52 rows entered at the beginning of the year. Of those, so then throughout the year, I can go in easily, and if somebody is on FMLA for week number 5, 6, 7, and 8, they're expected for that week, their percentage, we figure everything based on percentage, their percentage for those weeks they're on FMLA is 0. But if they're at full, or a new staff person may have a ramp-up period, so we don't expect them to be at 100% of their productivity for the first 4 weeks, say. So during the weeks 1 and 2, it's 0%. 3 and 4, it may be 25%. So then we put that percentage for that week in there, and then it continues to calculate based on that. But the other thing we did differently was, and we're still fine-tuning this, but we created a field where we're collecting the actual hours they worked. So their productivity is based on the hours that they worked. So there's no excuses anymore. If they were off on Monday, then they worked 32 hours. Of that 32 hours, your percentage didn't change. Your percentage is the same percentage now on 32 hours. So that's how we're calculating it now. So they can see, so there's no reason anymore that it's calculated based on the hours you worked. You worked 32, you have to get 60-something% of the 32.
Talk about it on the flip side when they do overtime.
Oh, yes. So
I have a question. Where are you pulling the hours from to know that, like you said, 90 people? So where's that data coming from?
it's based on staff duration for the week. So you can probably explain
Well,
how.
it's coming from ADP, from the time.
Oh, the hours the staff
Yeah, the
worked.
hours of work, but
Yeah, because our system, we have salary.
Yeah, right
We
now.
can't pull that from ADP, so we fill it out.
Well, for the salaried people, we put in, unless they took a day off, we don't have hardly any salaried people anymore. We've almost moved with the changes that are coming up. We've been anticipating.
That transition.
yeah.
Right, so we have very few salaried people.
Don't you track their time off in ADP?
Yes, we do.
So you can just subtract, that's actually what we do. We import our hours worked from ADP into SQL to report our productivity. So we subtract out the vacation
Okay.
time
Gotcha.
That's what I wanted to do.
before we import.
Okay, so
The issue that ADP is like every 2 weeks, and they wanted it for last week, and they wanted, and now it's 2 weeks old.
Right, and that's where we've got to tighten those time. They want it much quicker than we're giving it to them, so we're giving it to them after payroll now. So they really want it real time. So by Monday, or they would want to know all the time where am I at right now. And as a leader, I would want to know that as well. So while we haven't arrived, this has put us in a much better position to be there. And our goal is ultimately to be moving that ADP, much like you described, over there, pretty continuously.
Mention the flip side, when somebody works overtime, because
So-
not a lot of agencies do this. This didn't go over as well.
Yeah, and Candy has been discussing this for years. So there were all the reasons why I was gone, I was this, I was that. Well, since we've moved to almost all staff being hourly, we have a little more overtime than we used to. The percentage is based on actual hours worked. So if they work 42 hours, it is now on 42 hours. If they work 45 hours, it's on 45 hours. They don't get a break because actually they're costing us more now because it's time and a half for that 2 hours. So the percentage is based on actual hours worked. And Steve's correct, didn't go over well and still isn't going over well. But it has reduced overtime, I will say, and some staff are not working the overtime anymore. Suddenly they can get their things done in the amount of time they need to, and it is like I said, we just started this July 1st, and we're still kind of working out some of the kinks, but it's pretty exciting, and it's a much more accurate way to look at productivity based on, you don't have to deal with they were on, and then at the end of the fiscal year, you don't remember who was on family medical leave on the first and second week in November. So you're just dealing with it real time, so it's much
Got it.
better.
Yep. Okay.
So we do a very similar thing, but most of our clinicians are salaried and exempt. But but they still put all their work hours in the timekeeping system. So what I'm wondering is if Echo can import from a system like that. The other thing that we do that really made them happier is that we track, our primary interest is their year-to-date average billability percentage. So that if they have a couple bad weeks, we're like, okay,
And we do that as well.
you're responsible for picking it back up now.
So that's how this
Yep.
report, so the report I give them weekly will tell, so it has week 1, 2, so this is just through week 12. But you can see this staff person was starting to increase their numbers. They got into the green, looks like on week 9. But for year to date, they're still negative 18.25, so they still need to make up 18.25 hours somewhere to meet their annual productivity target. So the way we're looking at it though, it doesn't, it should increase at the end of the year for our agency as wide, our total productivity that we expected, because it's based on every hour they work now. So before we were just taking that number and kind of considering everybody was going to meet, 45 weeks out of the year, full productivity. Now it moves based on, as long as they're not taking time off without pay, that they're only using their vacation and sick time that they have. And now that we're hourly, most people, are using time. They're not cheating the system too much anymore.
Are you factoring denials in here at all? So if there's a denial 90 days ago, is it subtracted?
No. That'd be really nice.
That's how you get 1,000 dashboards, right there.
That would be very nice.
That one thing usually always leads to something else like, can we fit that in? That's been good in working with this. I'd keep coming back to Elijah or Gavin saying, well, now we got to get this in there. It really needs to be a part of it. But
so when you talk again, you think that people don't like, I think the overtime, they're not happy about having productivity on overtime. Wait till it's based on claims that are paid.
actually get paid.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually, our agency is primarily fee for service, so they get, at the end of the week or 2-week period or whatever, they get paid for all the actual services they did. But then if 90 days later, we find that there was a denial, it was because of their fault, because they didn't check eligibility or whatever, we have a policy take back, so we take back money from them. They don't like that, I'll tell you.
I bet they don't. I bet they
But it's a
don't.
way to handle it.
Right. So the other thing we've done, so in that same table, we collect what department staff work in, so that then we also have a report that says where they're at by department. So while it's not, we'd like to see all of them at 100%, every department at 100%. What we have found is staff have really started getting our chief, so 2 of our, Tanya and Tim, who probably a lot of you know, they've been here a number of times to the conference. They both are responsible for all the clinical staff in the organization. So Tanya really, really hates green. Red. She really wants to see the green. So she has now got her leaders also producing more to help get that department up in the green. So it helps to bridge that gap when you've got it. So if either the leaders can get their staff producing at a level they need to, or they're going to have to make it up. But she just wants to see the green for the department in the end. And her position, she wants to know that the department's hitting the green. So somebody's going to make it up. So that's been really good for them to see it in that format.
How to get all that into a dashboard. So that was the challenge, and be able to look at department supervisors, staff over the fiscal years. So this is something that a CEO can look at literally. They can look at it every day. Of course, they're tabulating it weekly. So, but you can see the difference between expected and what's actually been produced. And then we got a flag of the drill down there. Oh yeah, and the drill down, let's go back. And the drill down then, to click on this, you would drill down, you could see which staff, or set your staff or a department in there, and you would see it grouped by that difference. But again, there's simplicity, but there's enough drill down that depending upon the staff level looking at it, they should be able to get to the critical pieces that they need. I think a lot from your discussion, it seems like a lot of agencies are at a place where you're collecting this data in the system and you're trying to present it in a way. I've been excited with working with Echo to kind of develop a dashboard that literally can work from crystal reports that we've used for so long and try to get it into a dashboard format that anyone can look at and see. So great. Okay, so we've collected all this data. What's the next step? Is this even possible? Somebody hinted at it. Somebody hinted at it. We've got 20 years worth of data in this database, and it represents all the clinical stuff that we've done, all the diagnoses, all of the visits, everything that we've done, and we now have the capability of not just looking at it, but we have the capability of actually analyzing it. Many of you, if you've been around Echo long enough, and it's still on peer-to-peer, have heard of Rapid Insight, also a company in North Conway. And Rapid Insight used to be, they had a piece that was connected to Echo. I think now on peer-to-peer, you got to kind of approach them separately. But when Rapid Insight heard about what I was doing with the dashboards, they thought about how their software might be utilized or something like that. Their bread and butter is predictive analytics in education. So based upon a demographic to be able to predict if that student is going to be successful. They also have started to implement it in a medical model in a hospital, look at infection rates and surgeries and things like that and be able to do some predictive things based upon the data that they had. The discussion that we had was, is it possible to build a model in behavioral health that is also predictive? Based upon 20 years worth of good data that can get at, we know what has been successful. We can look at all the different variables and see what made up that success. So we tried to do that. Here's what we came up with. Heritage does a DLA, which is a daily living skills assessment. It's a evidence-based product that's out there, and it looks at different areas of somebody's life, and it generates a score. Well, they've got years and years worth of DLA information. We looked at DLA information on the active clients that were in the system by program that they were in, either an MI program, an SA program, or a combination of both, and actually looked at their predicted change based upon that first score. We wanted to look at the very first score that somebody got literally within that first couple of weeks and be able to get to the point where maybe we could predict what their DLA score was going to be at discharge, all things being equal. But the neat thing is, what this is doing is breaking down the active caseload into what's called a decile, so it's basically dividing it up into 10 groups and looking at where these are at. So the predicted change here, these are positive predictions, and these are ones where it might go down. And then we tried to look at some of the variables that impacted that. So for this first group here, this is the amount of average contacts that group had. And you can kind of see the ones that are more successful, these first two, got the most contacts in the system. So that was a significant variable. And then contacts that were non-billable. Just a different way of looking at it. But again, here's the most successful. They had the least contacts that were non-billable, suggesting that. So it was basically looking at this big pool and saying, what is impacting this success? But how significant would it be, and Dan kind of talked about it, how significant would it be if I could drill down on these with the least predictive success, drill down, drill down.
I was like listening. I was
Okay,
like,
you were waiting for the
I was like,
punchline.
What?
Drill down. Now, these are not client codes. These are just random numbers. But literally, I could have a list to work from where I could focus my. These are predictively, based upon everything that we've got in our system, probably going to be the least successful in our environment. What do I want to do to change that outcome? By program, you could do this by program. Now that it's in there, so basically, I got to the point with Rapid Insight, and we've had enough discussion that they are now at a point where they're beginning to think about a behavioral health model for what they're trying to do. So that literally, if we want to start looking at the data that we've collected, finding out what those variables are, and literally getting to the point where we can identify those clients that might not have, would have the least success in what we're doing. And that's where you focus. That's where your clinical staff can focus. So hopefully, after all of that, you're not feeling like that. But questions?
Steve, I'm sorry. I missed
Yep, go
the
ahead,
first
Dan.
little bit, so you may have said this, but this was all built in the Echo product or through Rapid Insight? Or through
This was built with Rapid Insight connected to the live database. So it's looking at the live database and doing all this crunching.
We actually did Rapid Insight for a period of time, just like you guys did, and did some predictive analysis for our psychiatric residential treatment program. And we were able to figure out with certain diagnoses what an average length of stay would be, so we can have predictive analysis based off their primary diagnosis, how much longer they could be in the program,
Yep.
and correlate that back to custody.
The nice thing about a behavioral model like that is that software can see every piece of data that you've collected over the years in fields and be able to look at what those variables are. And it does it I was really surprised at how quick it could pull all that stuff together. But they've got the connections now. If your database was a part of it, some of your outcomes, like you wouldn't have a DLA type thing, but define your success, where you collect that in your system. How do you know if you've had a successful treatment? Is it a discharge code? Is it a discharge score on some test that you have? If that data is in your system, all those numbers become available now to actually start doing, to me, the next step, which is the predictive analytics. We're starting to do a good job of collecting it. We're even doing a better job looking at it now with dashboards and Crystal. But that next step, which the medical folks have kind of caught up, and they're starting to do a lot of that. We're a little bit farther behind, but that's the next step for us, is being able to really start defining what we can do. Other questions? Yep. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I continue to sit on the board of Rapid Insight.
Did they tell you that we were messing with this, George?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, no secret.
Okay, good.
As those of you know, Joe Viget, who was with Echo for so many years, had moved over to work at Rapid Insight, and we're neighbors and certainly colleagues. And the dashboarding piece is a tremendous way to take massive amounts of data and present it to you in an edible, absorbable fashion. And so the productivity information and so on, here's the expectation and here's the actual. It's just really very, very well designed to do that. If you want to go that next step and move to looking at which variables influence outcomes, then there are a couple things you have to have. And the single hardest thing we had as far as building a team effort, an echo-driven effort, was some consistency of assessment instrument or measure of success. If you're all measuring your success differently, doesn't mean you can't get valuable information out of Rapid Insight, but it means you can't compare with each other, and you can't find standards and baselines and measure yourself against some common and shared standard. If in fact this CCBHC kind of stuff really catches fire, and if certain instruments like the PHQ-9 or the Basis 32 or whatever, if the industry and if ECHO customers as a group can get together and say, yeah, here are 2 or 3 or 4 of these, maybe for different populations that we're going to utilize and utilize on an ongoing basis, then there's really an opportunity here to build a user group or user community where you folks are sharing stuff about what clinical practices work best with which particular populations, and however you define the characteristics of those populations. And whether Steve takes the lead in sort of organizing that or whatever, the tools are there. And the stuff we do, the dashboarding piece, that's great and can get you a lot of good data. But if you want to go that next step and have statistical reliability about assumptions you're making, then you have to have some common set of measures that you're basing it on. And this would be a great place to put together a group of 2 or 5 or 7 agencies that say, you know, we're ready to start talking about that. And maybe whether you use ECHO to do it, whether Steve wants to do it, there may be some opportunity. To me, that would be just a great thing for me to be involved with, and I care a lot about that. So
Yeah, I mean, that's great, George. I mean, that's really exciting. I mean, if there were 3 or 4 agencies, you've already got the data, but if we had a common instrument that start defining success, because that's what to build this model, we had to define, oh, well, this is how Heritage is defining success. And we got this field, this field, this field, and, you know, oh, use this one too. But if we were all using a common one, that would really be exciting, because then that model's translated and just be just connected to your database and do what it's going to do. That was the exciting, yeah, that's exciting.
So I
Yep.
just
Good.
comment on that, and I'm just wondering, as these types of conversations are going on, clearly, you know, you're across the country, each state has its own assessment requirement.
yes and no.
Yeah.
That's a moving target. There are states that impose those things, but in many cases, it's really up to you that if you have a tool or tools for your different populations. You know, everybody using exactly the same tool for all clients, that probably doesn't make sense. But are there some common ground? Are there 3 or 5 or 7 instruments that people can come up with sort of a common agreement on? And if so, then there can be joint efforts that we can help guide. I don't think distances matter very much in this. I think we can coordinate calls and have people get together via you know, WebEx kinds of communications and so on. I think there's a lot we can do, and we're willing to invest in that. The problem for us is that you folks are snowflakes. No 2 of you are the same, and so snowflakes does sound to me.
Thank you, George.
You're a flake. But I do feel like our efforts in the past all revolved around Axis 5. You know, DSM-3, DSM-4, we thought, hey, everybody's going to get behind this, and it doesn't even matter to us all that much whether it's that good or that bad, but at least everybody, it didn't happen, and of course, that's all history now. And so, what are the instruments that are coming out? Maybe the CCBHC process will drive that and create some consistency in comparison.
I think it's a shorter walk than we may think. I've appreciated, I mean, ECHO asked, when we were working on this, the staff that were doing it, Elijah, Gavin, Alan, Matt initially, they were asking me the right questions from a clinical and financial perspective, so they were getting it, and I was really surprised at how fast the Rapid Insight folks picked it up too, because that was beyond their, I mean, that wasn't in their wheelhouse initially. I mean, they had it, but when we started talking about that on a behavioral health, they really started to pick up asking the right questions. And knew what to look for, and they were starting to make connections that I didn't even have to prompt. So that was, I was pretty excited that they jumped, they got there that fast. So I know we're kind of at the end. If there's any other questions, grab Mary or I. Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you very much.